We are ready to start our last segment of today. It's going to be a crypto panel. Actually, guys, if you can start coming towards the stage. As I said earlier, we'll be staging a little crypto fight, so to speak, between some of the projects represented here. Many cryptos, especially Bitcoin, have a lot of infighting, especially like with the Bitcoin Cash stuff that's been going on recently and the fork. So it's like civil war. But now hopefully we'll be entertained by some hard-hitting arguments, not just within the borders, but across the crypto borders. So hopefully we'll get a nice and heated discussion going here. So welcome on stage, Danny Sessom, the host of the Crypto Show. Please give him a hand.
All right, where am I sitting? Where? Hold together. I guess.
All right. Let's, you can bring him on.
Oh, just I guess for Bitcoin is Richard Hart. All right.
All right.
And you were the what's your name then? Kevin from EOS. Who else do we have? We have Rob Viglione from Horizen, no longer Zencash, just in case you didn't know. Jared Tate from Digibyte. And you're with Holochain? Okay, I actually know you. Ah, okay. I remember you from Austin. So. So I thought that maybe we could do a roast of Bitcoin Cash.
All right, I'm on it.
I don't know. What do you think?
I'm for that. Should we mic? Like, who wants to go first roasting Bcash?
Well, you're kind of the naysayer here, so I figured let's have you first. We have Colin of Nexus as well. He's with he has the the proof of harmony chain. Right? No, just kidding. It's a joke.
So let's take Bitcoin Cash, right? Roger Ver promoted Bitcoin. It was Bitcoin Judas for a long time, and I'm sorry, Jesus. He's Bitcoin Judas now.
Jeebus with a B.
Right? And he tried his best to make it successful, but he never actually hired any devs. And that's something that you see these cryptocurrencies do. Like, if you don't run a node and you're not a miner and you don't hire devs, you pretty much need to shut up. Like, you shouldn't really have much of a say in what's going on. I'm glad you bought a bag and you want your bag to pump, but if you're not mining it and you're not helping develop it, you're not actually part of the ecosystem, right? So Roger thought, well, okay, maybe if I browbeat them and talk crap enough, then they'll change, right? And he thought, oh, well, where's the place that I can influence them? By the group that's just paying these open source developers. Mm-hmm. So he tried to lean on Blockstream. And what he doesn't realize is Blockstream could make good software, they can make bad software, but they can't make miners double-click their EXE. And that's the only thing that actually matters, is what the EXE contains, and if you double-click it or not, that becomes the Bitcoin network. So Roger, since he couldn't do what the system is designed to make him not be able to do. The system's made to have no central point of failure, so a government can't force you to roll back transactions, can't force you to censor people, right? Like, you can't censor WikiLeaks donations, because anyone can transact on the network. There's no banning them, right? There's no ban by country, no ban by citizen, no ban by age. Anyone can use it. And Roger said, oh, well, I want to force my will on the system. And he wasn't able to do it. Well, thank God. So he did his own fork. He tried to steal all the miners and caused the flippening. And he failed. And he lost money doing it. He sold his good Bitcoin for a crap coin that was at one point 20% the value of Bitcoin, and today is 5 to 6% the value of Bitcoin.
And now he's dealing with Craig Wright, and so it seems kind of like there's just these two egos at the top, and that's who's running this thing.
Right.
And what I was thinking that all of these projects on stage are a little bit different. They have governance models with Nexus and Zencash. EOS even has with the block producers. You have all the community actually pitches in and decides what's going to happen within the coin. And Jared with Digibyte you're a little bit different, but
Bcash wouldn't be here today if
Yeah.
they didn't directly fork from my repo to fix the difficulty problem with the block timing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Can you explain how that happened?
Yeah, so what happened back in 2014, we pioneered something we call DigiShield. What that really means, without going into too much technical difficulty, is we made a real-time difficulty adjustment. So the way the difficulty adjustment currently works in Bitcoin is every 2016 blocks. Well, that works great when everything happens like it should. Well, what we would see back in 2014, because you had these mining pools that would go from coin to coin to coin, and when we first launched, we were a script, is you would see a 20-fold increase in hash rate, and like in our case, we had a 2-hour retarget, not 2 weeks, and we would have blocks mined every few seconds, right? And then they would leave, and the chain would freeze. So we came up with a solution for this real-time adjustment. And the original idea behind Digibyte was like, hey, we can create something that can help make Bitcoin better. That was why we actually wanted to test it, and we did all this starting in 2013, right? So what happened is several coins were being attacked during this period of time. And actually, when I helped fix Dogecoin, their chain froze for 2 days, basically. So it's a real problem, and that's why I was on Twitter, and I'm like, hey, I don't know what everybody's waiting for. This Bitcoin Cash fork, it's going to be hours, weeks before the chain stabilizes. You can't take something, with 1/10 of the hash rate and expect it to behave normally. So.
Awesome. You want to go next then, Rob?
Yeah, what do you want me to say?
Well, so talk about the governance, with the Zencash or Horizen and with Nexus as well. You guys have a governance model. Talk about how that kind of keeps these things from happening.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're dealing with a globally distributed network where you have a lot of people, you have no idea who they are, and you have to come to terms agreeably, we hope, about how to do things, like how to allocate resources, how to determine what's going to be what features are going to the next hard fork, are we going to hard fork next? So what we did was we took, we actually started with Dash as a model, and then started doing some game theory research and integrating that with some snark technology, so zero-knowledge cryptography, to try to fix what we thought were some of the problems with modern voting systems.
Right.
So we want to have a voting system that's on-chain that we can all kind of peacefully agree should be used for, in our case, we're tackling the first problem, resource allocation. How do we fund what projects, right? So we're actually built a voting system that uses private voting. You get paid to vote, so you kind of overcome the voter apathy problems there. So far we have it in prototype. We'll see how it works in production, whether or not it's a liquid democracy framework where you can delegate your voting stake. So it's interesting. It's as an empiricist, I would never say this is a solution that's going to be perfect, but at least we're pointing in a certain direction. This is what I love about the kind of altcoins out there, is these other projects where we can all experiment in different dimensions. Like what Jared and Digibyte did with focusing on certain problems that just weren't being fixed in Bitcoin, or maybe fixing them in a different way. We can all contribute to an ecosystem that I think right now, the ecosystem surviving and thriving or growing is the big problem. It's not which project is going to take what market share of a really tiny market. We need the other 99% of people out there in the world to actually want to get into this ecosystem.
Right.
I could comment on governance real quick.
Okay.
So I think most people's advice on the tactics that anything should do is wrong and stupid. So if you're getting heart surgery and you're like, well, let me ask my neighbor what type of scalpel we should use. No, your neighbor doesn't have any useful input at all. It will do you harm, right? If you're dealing with blockchains, which are cutting edge technology, no one that owns their bags and has voting rights has any useful input at all on which curve of elliptical curve cryptography you should be using, right? Like, should be a Koblitz curve or should be an NSA curve. Why? They don't know, and you shouldn't be trying to get their opinions. And the other thing I see that's really inefficient in blockchains is bounty systems. Mm-hmm. So we're too stupid to hire. So instead, we're going to just set up a bounty, and then everyone can duplicate the same work and waste their time trying to do the same thing, which is probably not even the right thing. But now we can have 10 times as many people waste their time doing it, and then we only choose one of them, and maybe they did an okay job. And the other 9 people just got their time wasted. Bounties are stupid, and voting governance is stupid.
When you,
I'd like to add something there if I can.
Okay.
Only because, first, I love what you were saying about liquid democracy, and also that these are cutting-edge technologies. So to expect participation from an entire network to weigh in on things as sensitive, like do we need a hard fork here or here, and which technologies we actually integrate. We spent a lot of time on EOS trying to outline actually that delineation between, because we do have the capability to solicit token holder opinion, delineate between what is under block producer purview to update as they see fit versus what actually referendum does. So, for example, the typical user on EOS is someone that has access to EOS tokens, which afford resources on the network, which you can then engage with decentralized applications, whatever they are. Right now, gambling dApps are very popular. It came to a point where some of those resources, as the usage goes up, the cost goes up. And block producers were able to come together and understand that there were some global parameters on chain that we could then take 15 out of 21, adjust, and make the network resources more affordable without actually impacting the performance of the network. We actually got to the point where we did impact the performance of a network a little bit, and we dialed it back. And that happened within a week period. And that was something that the experts got together, decided, and then there are other things in the governance layer that the token holders will be able to decide as well.
Richard, when you were speaking earlier, you were talking about we need adoption. We don't need another blockchain that only has one transaction. Well, these tokens that have these incentives through governance are actually out there advertising and doing all types of things to actually reach out to new people to get adoption, to bring people in. And I think that governance models are very important for that.
Can you imagine a world where you need a token to get a drink, and a token to get a sandwich, and a different token to get in the restaurant, a token to reserve your seat? They're all different tokens.
Yeah, well, I have the dollar, but I can't spend it here. I had to switch my token for kronars, so
that's worse, right? So multiple tokens is worse, right? That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I agree with you.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
The title of this panel talk is The Future of Cryptocurrencies. Is that right? Okay, so there only seems to be like 2 representatives of any actual cryptocurrencies here, right? And secondly, there's a great article. I'm going to be really flipping blunt here, right? Okay, so excuse me, but like, there's a great article, and it's by a guy called Nick Carter, and he wrote an article. It's a Medium article, and it's basically, he wrote, the blockchain has become this semantic wasteland, right? And that's basically what happens, right? Because everyone's taken this word blockchain or this idea or this technology, and they've tried to make it mean everything. And what happens when it means everything is that it ends up meaning fuck all, right? And that's what's happening. And there's people here chatting about stuff that actually means nothing because we don't even know what they're chatting about. So if we want to talk about cryptocurrencies, let's talk about cryptocurrencies. If you want to talk about platforms for decentralized governance or autonomous organizations or tokenization, then just talk about that. Is that fair enough?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think that comes back to like,
Yeah.
defining the term. Are we talking about blockchain? Are we talking about cryptocurrency? What are we really talking about here, right? And the reality is the definition is different to everybody in this room. So.
Well, Colin, let's switch to you.
Uh-oh.
Oh, okay. Tell me a little bit about what you're trying to do with Nexus as far as music payments for the music industry and stuff like that. Because we're
I mean,
talking about how are you going to get adoption? Well,
yeah, I agree that it's become kind of a semantic wasteland. Everybody says blockchain this, blockchain that, and oh yeah, I'm going to have this sensor, talk to this sensor and blah blah blah, and it's like that's called the internet, dude. I mean, the blockchain is one aspect of it. But ultimately, what we're focused on is making blockchain practical, making it useful, making it something that people can feel in touch. Because right now, it's still this, thing that went from $20,000 to $5,000 to most people. And so dealing with things that really, really need the help, let's say music, it's a technological vacuum. There's nothing there. They still run papers. There's publishers of publishers. Artists can't get paid. It's very difficult for anybody to actually make anything real from it. So what we focus on is making tokens something useful instead of a token to buy your coffee and a token because so many people say, hey, I'm making this token, and now you're going to have to pay for my service with this token. And I'm going to create an economic incentive to use it. That's not something that's going to be really valuable because the token still is a speculative instrument based on the speculation of the value of that specific service that you provide. What we want them to do is be something that you can actually use in your life, let's say to represent the ownership of something. So you have an artist and the publishers and the label and everything else that holds a certain amount of these tokens. And maybe the artist wants to do a crowdfund and say, I'm going to sell 10% of these tokens on the open market in order to represent some digital material. And with that change from a previous register that represents the metadata, you can split the revenue anytime that something comes in to pay for a license. Now, with the Music Modernization Act, it fits in very well with that so that you can actually see artists get paid. It's transparent. And tokens actually can be something more than a speculative instrument that people just throw around and try to make something valuable.
Okay. Can I comment on DLT? Because it's DLT, distributed ledger technology. So in any business or ecosystem, some people get to make a lot of money, and everyone else gets to stay broke, right? So in cryptocurrencies, they have to go up in value because to play the game, you have to buy more coins, right? You want to make more gains, you got to buy more coins. But when you get into these DLT plays, like that one, if that technology is amazing and it works really, really well, and it saves costs for the producers and the music makers and all that stuff, those guys get to capture all that value. And the actual chain itself will only make its hype value, right? Because you don't have to buy a lot of economic mass of those tokens to get the benefits of whatever the cool DLT stuff is, right? So it's the same thing with Monero. I can get all the benefits of Monero by just buying one Monero and cycling everything through it. I don't actually have to buy a lot of economic mass of it. So any of these coins that isn't trying to be a currency, is trying to be a DLT play or trying to be an anonymity play, if the markets accurately valued those, they wouldn't have large market caps because you don't actually have to buy much of them to get the benefits of what they do. If they do have large market caps, it's not because they're being used for their utility, it's because people want to get mad gains on the pump.
Okay. You were telling me something last night about the zero knowledge proofs and how that you can actually make new coins without.
Oh yeah, undetectable inflation, right. So anytime you make a new anonymity coin, part of the anonymity means that you don't know who got paid what or when, and thus you don't know what the actual supply of the currency is. So if there's a bug, if something breaks, tons and tons of coins could be being minted that you don't know about, and the only way you detect it is by the price perhaps crashing. But if they don't crash the price and they just sell them subtly, you won't be able to detect the inflation at all, which is a gigantic problem because these things do break. I mean, Bitcoin almost broke a couple weeks ago from an inflation bug that they just barely caught, and that would have been terrible. And that's the best crypto team we have on Earth.
5,000 plus of the best.
Yeah, I'll accept on the point that there are bugs, and there have been bugs, and quite substantial and serious bugs, but they were caught and they were dealt with in a responsible manner. Just on the inflation stuff, like I'm not a technical expert, so I'm not going to stand here and speak with any real authority to that, but what I will tell you is that there are ways to do an audit of a chain, and it's because you know how many blocks have been produced and how many coin bases have been rewarded. And if you know that much, and then you know how many UTXOs are still to be spent, then you can just make sure that the outputs equal the inputs, and that's basically what you do.
I'm pretty sure other crypto note protocols that weren't Monero did have this inflation bug and were exploited.
Yeah,
and one of them even pumped.
I could believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, Verge pumped, and it was a crypto note fork, and it even had I believe the exploit utilized on it, which is less common. So we do find exploits, and they're usually caught before people use them. But every once in a while, they do get used, and sister coins of Monero that use the same crypto note protocol did have it exploited. He named it as Verge, and it was so.
And I just want to say here, guys, like we have to be honest. These are all experiments. I mean, we're starting out. This is a less than 10-year-old industry. So a lot of these technologies that we're trying, like the zero knowledge stuff, crypto note, it's new. So expect there to be bugs. Expect the technology to mature. That's why I think the market capitalization pumps to date have been a little bit premature.
And when those things broke, well, you have experience in that with the 51% attack. I mean,
yeah,
and that ended up being something to build it stronger, right?
Yeah, so our chain on Horizen, we were actually 51% attacked back in June. And in the crypto world, this is one of the worst things that could possibly happen. But the thing is, from our perspective, was it forced us really to fix what has been a problem in the industry for 10 years now, which is the longest chain rule in this naive form can be exploited. So now we have a 2-check system. But I mean, the whole point of that was, okay, this is a constantly evolving system, and we should just be a little bit realistic about that, especially as we attach valuations, like real world valuations, to really what are early stage technologies.
When people say the longest chain, they usually don't know what that actually means. So longest chain as a term should never actually be used. So it should be the heaviest weight chain, okay? Because I can make a longer chain just by mining blocks that didn't play by the rules, but they have higher block numbers. Or I can fork the network, right, which just happened on Bitcoin Cash, and one chain had a higher difficulty. It was harder to mine the blocks, and one had a lower difficulty, right? So what you do is you multiply how many blocks happened by how much hash rate was necessary to do that, and then you end up with whichever chain is the heaviest, and that is supposed to be the true chain because that was the one that cost the most to vote for in electricity and mining power, right? It's just like birds have fancy feathers so that you know they've got extra resources, so if they could waste all that energy, they probably have got the bases covered. They can handle like protecting you from other birds and such. That's what blockchain is, right? Proof of work. So it's not longest chain, it's heaviest chain.
Well, that only works in a single algo system.
A single what?
A single algorithm system. So like in the case, what we do is we have 5 independent algorithms that are weighted separately, right? So in a way, it's in a single algo system.
You should be able to get a kilojoule. You know how efficient each algo is, and you should be able to still reverse calculate how much energy it took to do it. It should still work.
We're going to have this conversation later in detail. Let's get into technical stuff, but yeah, there is a difference.
It depends on the amount of actual innovation in the mining hardware too, because that does increase efficiency, and it's difficult to measure. We have multiple channels too, and one of them is prime numbers. So that's another very difficult one because the difference in your sieving algorithm can completely change the entire algorithm itself. But I'd also like to add to what Richard said. That is true. But I think before he was mentioning the original protocol, which was pre-checkpointed, longest chain as far as block number, and I think that's one thing we can give Blockstream. That was a good innovation to do the heaviest weight chain because that makes it that much more secure.
I mean, Bcash just re-enabled checkpointing. They only allow you to roll back the chain. So when the Bitcoin Cash guys didn't want to keep getting the threat of reorg from Calvin Ayre throwing money at it, and they had more hash rate until Roger was like, well, you paid for Bitcoin mining and our cloud mining thing through Bitcoin.com. We're just going to mine Bitcoin Cash with it because it suits my purposes. I have a big bag of that stuff. So they just switched all their hash rate over, and they got about 20 blocks ahead. I think maybe 22 blocks ahead, which is a lot. Like, it's the energy of the Hoover Dam ahead, right? So now they have checkpointing. So even if you try and reorg their chain, all the nodes that play by these new rules with the new software, they'll only let you screw up one of the last block's transactions, which is dangerous because now it's a centralized third party that decides who the real chain is, not chain weight or chain length.
Well, we said before that we're at great risk to become a semantic wasteland. I completely agree. Because if you're not running a node, if you're not a developer, if you don't know what you're talking about and you're spending a lot of your time talking, and those are the people that are talking the most, there's a problem. But we said, because this is new and it is an experiment, we can fall into semantic wasteland, but we also are exploring the definitions of these words, and we don't want to lock ourselves into something very specific. And one of the things that you said was proof of work is blockchain. Well, I think that we're seeing multiple models of cryptographically linking groups of blocks into a ledger that is shared across a number of nodes, however those nodes are chosen. So I just wanted to say that we're exploring the very definition of the word blockchain besides the models that it supports.
You can go on Wikipedia and look up different forms of consensus networks. I mean, people have been figuring out how to keep networks that are apart from each other in sync for a very long time. And they figured out a whole ton of ways to do it. The innovation in Bitcoin wasn't the data structure. It was the game theory and allowing anyone to join and leave the network. And it wasn't so much like DAG versus binary tree versus however you want to store your data, right? Like that wasn't actually the innovation. The economics was.
That's true. Cipher blockchaining is something that was invented around the 70s or 80s, if I recall, which is essentially what it is. But Hashcash was the actual consensus mechanism that came in. It's a modified version of Hashcash. Hashcash is just partial pre-image collisions, but this is actually 0-bit pre-image collisions. But yeah, I mean, it did create a massive change in the game theory and allow that Byzantine fault tolerance to not be 30% of the actual active nodes, which anybody with a large botnet could Sybil attack, but actually 51% of the actual hashing power, which increased the cost to the validation, which made the security of it high enough to support a cryptocurrency.
Well, Moritz, how does Holochain handle this?
I don't have any comments on the BCH thing or Bitcoin at the moment. We're doing something completely different, so I don't know whether that's of interest.
Can you tell me about Holochain? I
Sure.
know very little about it.
I mean, what I presented earlier today is pretty much that. We have a very different architecture. We're combining already proven technologies, DHTs, as well as hash chains with application code, and we add validation functions to the DHT and to the hash chains to be able to have the same data integrity that blockchains have, but basically not the problem with scaling and with energy expenditure. And so we do something very different. We're not building a currency, so that's why I don't have comments on the currency part.
I think another thing to remember is, people talk about 51% attacks so much because they're obvious and they're fun to understand, like the story of bad guy, good guy fight, right? But if you look at how these networks are actually attacked, 51% of attacks are very rare because you can't make any money, right? Because you're limited to having to buy the coin and then have an exchange, and now you've got to screw that exchange by double spending them, and then you got to hope the chain doesn't get rolled back, and you got to hope another exchange accepts the coins you just stole. There's all these reasons that 51% attacks don't work that have nothing to do with the chain. They have to do with the commerce, right? That bug, that inflation bug that almost happened in Bitcoin, if you would have paid a team of guys to develop and find more bugs like that, you'd probably end up net positive over just buying hash rate and trying to cheat in 51% attack instead of just mining like a normal dude and making.
So here's a really good question, and I was talking to you about this before because I was very interested in the Monero Forum Fund that you were talking about. EOS is faced with the same challenge, and the challenge is, how do you fund that which is no individual's responsibility but the responsibility of the collective? How do you make a massive collective decision? That's something that I think is plaguing many of us up here, is that we're in many cases operating what are valued at multi-billion-dollar networks. Now, whatever you think about the value, it doesn't matter. That's what the current market is saying that it is. And the fact that we're unable to say, okay, we see a very clear problem. It's coming. The train is coming down the tracks. We know a group of 5 people that have the expertise to sit in a room. We just need to be able to pay them so they don't have to go do another job during that time and figure it out. And yet when we all say, well, I'm not going to pay for it. Well, are you going to pay for it? No. All right, well, how do we fix this?
Can I just say something? Yeah, we did talk earlier, and I also talked with Nadir, who's from the Norwegian Tax Authority. And if you think about this general development fund, right, it's similar to like a tax that you would have in the normal economic system. So everyone donates to this general fund, and then somebody decides how to spend it, and usually you hope that it's for the betterment of the whole society, right? So the question becomes whether or not you want a centralized authority controlling that, okay, and controlling how much is taken and when it's taken and what it's spent on, or you want the society to decide how they give it, and you want to trust them that they will give it, and they will give it in a transparent and open way, and they will give it to good projects that will better the society. So in some models, you can put a tax on the mining reward, and that goes into a development fund, and that's distributed out. But in Monero, we make it completely up to the user what they want to contribute to, when they want to contribute to, and how much they want to contribute, right? That would be the alternative. So it's more like the Norwegian model, where there's a lot of trust involved in your tax returns, from my understanding from our conversation, than maybe some of the other tax models that we've seen in other states.
Interesting fact, that inflation bug was found by a Bitcoin Cash developer, and Bitcoin Cash was vulnerable to it as well, as with many other forks. Most people don't realize it, but most of these cryptocurrencies are just forks of Bitcoin. Zcash is a fork of Bitcoin. They just changed a lot of stuff, right? And there's a lot of stuff they didn't change, right? So in Bitcoin, the only guys we have that are super duper smart working this, that are in teams, are basically Blockstream, which was founded by Adam Back and I don't remember the other dude's name, sorry, other dude, and founded by Reid Hoffman, who founded LinkedIn, right? And they're not a profitable company, in my opinion, but they create lots of open source software that makes the world a better place. That's not really a sustainable way to develop things, right? And they're demonized for that. They're demonized for building free software at a loss every year, and people hate them for it, which is pretty gross. The other company that is the majority of commits to the Bitcoin project is Chain Code Labs out of New York, and those guys are also just doing it because they're so wealthy that they can, and they chose to do it. thank God for those guys, right? I've never hired a dev and for Bitcoin, and I'm happy that other people are doing that work to some degree. Thank God.
And just as an alternative model, I mean, I don't want to pitch Monero too much, but we have the community of Monero funded a research team of PhDs, of doctorates. They're cryptographic experts, mathematic experts, and that's basically their full-time job, is to look at new cryptographic research that has come out and understand how it can be integrated into not only our chain or our ledger, but of course it's open source software, so anybody can adopt any of the code that's produced from them and by our dev team or in conjunction. Yeah, I think we were the first like $1 billion cryptocurrency to implement bulletproofs. Bulletproofs came out of a different research project, Benedict Butts, I think his name is.
Bunts.
And
Bunts, Polstra, and Willa.
Yeah. So that they were there. Yeah, some big cryptographic heavyweights, but we were the first to implement it. So good research can come from anywhere. You've just got to make sure you have the good people working on it and funded.
I love how we were supposed to get up here and fight, but we're just talking about the technology we shared and what we've learned from each other.
Yeah.
Kumbaya blockchain.
So earlier, Colin, we were talking about projects that are just poking jabs at each other all the time, and why,
What's the point of it?
It's such a small community. Maybe 1% of the world even knows what cryptocurrency is, and that most of these communities are fighting each other. Why can't they work together?
Exactly.
And and move on from there.
Collaboration, I think, is a new model that we need as far as game theory is concerned, to show that it's more profitable. And the interesting thing is, I call it Metcalfe's law, which I don't call it, everybody else does, but Metcalfe's law basically states that the value of a telecommunication system is proportional to the square of its participants, which basically what that means is that more people collaborating together have more power than people competing against each other. And I like that this panel has kind of changed into something like that, where we're talking about the different things and how we can all help each other and work together and create these think tanks, because I think that's what's going to create the vibrant ecosystem we need. We don't need to have Blockstream this or not Blockstream this, or Bitcoin Cash, or I'm better than you or you're better than me, but collectively putting our ideas together into a pool and collaborating and checking and balancing one another and sharing ideas, I think, is what's going to make this a vibrant ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I 100% agree. I'm definitely a believer there's going to be multiple chains, because it's basically the blockchain industry today is a playground for cryptography and cryptographers. And so, each one of us in different ways is kind of innovated and pioneered, but the only way we know that technology works is if you get it out in the wild, and it can be, battle hardened and battle tested. It's really what it boils down to.
Someone's got to call it scammers.
Testing in production is what blockchain does.
Can we have like who thinks CSW Fotoshi is Satoshi? Raise your hand if you think he invented Bitcoin. Some girl was fixing her pen. She didn't know she voted. That was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Good timing. Yeah, someone's got to come up with the scammers, right? So it's fun to be all friendly and like, yo, we all got in really early. Look how rich we are. This is great. We're all buddies. But a lot of people got wrecked buying crappier projects, right? So if people bought Bitcoin at the top, which was 20K, and then they held it down to the local bottom 11 months later, which is 52.81, 52 something, 52.18. They lost 75%, but most other cryptos lost a lot more, right? So the difference between a crypto that lost 90% and 80%, a crypto that lost 90% is a crypto that lost 80% and then cut in half. That's how the math works out. So, even though these things have fallen 90%, they could keep falling another 90%. It's totally doable. And I think that if you're too friendly and too nice to terrible ideas, then you waste a lot of people's life savings, and you have a lot of very sad people. So, when I see a guy like CSW, I'll state publicly, if he was on fire, I wouldn't piss on him to put it out. He's the worst human being I know of.
What if you had to piss really, really bad? Did we invite him here? Actually, we did.
Can I ask?
He did not respond. He said he was actually supposed to be on this panel, but he didn't get back with me.
Can I ask Richard what you think of the shark pool? I know, Colin, you mentioned it at dinner yesterday. Can I just get your thoughts on that? It'd be interesting to hear both of your thoughts on that idea. Maybe explain it first for those of you who don't know.
So the shark pool is this idea that someone should be out there using hash rate to attack weaker coins. And if you believe in Darwinism, that kind of seems like you would call the herd and have a more excellent selection pressure to select for coins that sucked less. So from that perspective, I mean, I don't like the guys that are doing it. I don't like their political alignment, but the idea of having a selection pressure to get rid of crappy projects seems nice to me. So if you're into eugenics, I guess, and you don't care that much about the feelings of the hurt chains, then maybe it's not that terrible.
Could we try it out with ICOs first?
The SEC is working on that.
All right, yeah, so I'll take another tact on this. I think it's horrible. Ethically, it's terrible because you're intentionally trying to inflict economic destruction on other people. But from a competitive perspective, it's terrible because who are these people to say all these other projects are horrible? We're not going to let them even try. Not going to even let them try to compete. And of course, if we take a glance at X% of the projects on the market, you can say pretty straightforward. Well, I can't believe people are investing in them. But still, I couldn't imagine intentionally trying to destroy them. I'd prefer to let the market actually take care of that.
The market does not do a good job at that.
In the long term.
So EOS.io being different than EOS is the open source software product. And so thus far, even though that we've only launched less than 6 months ago, there are people that are unhappy with the way things that are going. And they were involved in launch and they shouted out to the rooftops, but they for some reason weren't heard. And so they said, all right, well, EOS.io is open source. We're going to take it. We're going to go do our own thing. And we see that with a number of chains that are happening now. And in EOS and in many communities, Telegram is a place where a lot of people gather and discuss. And in what are very clearly EOS-centric channels, these other chains that in many ways are direct competitors are coming in and saying, well, we're doing this better, we're doing this better. And there was actually a discussion not to whether or not, it was a discussion whether or not it should be allowed. This is an EOS-based channel. We've got another chain coming in here that's EOS.io based, but should they be allowed to? And ultimately, the community said, good, let them. Competition breeds champions. And that's the kind of attitude that I think we should be taking rather than attacking, because we just talked before about the sharing of the technology, that when people are allowed to play around in this cryptographic space, they're going to stumble upon something that you can't. Because ultimately, and I know this is a little kumbaya, but none of us are as smart as all of us, and we should be given the opportunity.
Yeah.
I think you can, competition breeds excellence, but you can compete in doing things that suck. Like who can rob grandma the best, right? That's like in Florida, that's a sport. Like call centers get set up and they steal money from old people, and some of them do better than others, and it's not a good competition, right?
And I'll just make one little comment because I'm seeing a bit of polarization, which I think is good. We get two different sides of everything. We got, Mr. Cynical over here, and then we got optimism over there. And I always equate it to, it's called the golden mean, which states that there's not good and evil, but there's that of two evils, which are of excess and deficiency. So if we have excess of stupidity, it's just as bad as deficiency. And what I mean by that is that we want to have these things that cut both ways, and collaboration is also sharing things that are bad ideas. Because sometimes you want to know and sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And some people, when they get in that competitive mindset, they believe that they know and they have to be right, and then it gets the ego fueling.
But I need to get my gardener on
the
blockchain.
Yeah, and I'm going to show you how my idea is so much better because I'm going to outmarket you. But if we just open doors and just receptive to one another, we're generally going to say, hey, well, here's my idea to do this. Well, I think that's a really bad idea. You shouldn't do that. This is why. And then you work together and you figure it out. So, just being able to recognize both perspectives, I think, is really important as well. Because, destruction is a form of creation.
You need to know which research studies didn't work. People don't like to publish them, but they're important, so you don't waste the next guy's time doing the next same exact study on something that didn't work.
I think collaboration only works when there's enough surplus value to go around. And at the moment, we still have enough of that, but who knows how long? When that goes down further, then the competition comes out. If there's not enough resource for everybody, we're not going to collaborate. Unless you want to create value, and that's when you have a path forward, then you can do collaboration.
There's a reason that vertical integration of companies and merging and cost efficiencies and economies of scale, that stuff's worked for hundreds of years. And a lot of the stuff that everyone in blockchain tries to do is the exact opposite of that. So we're going to get the worst deals possible by spreading all of our video card purchases out across as many people as you can. And we're going to get the worst data deal possible by, we're doing the opposite of what works in every other capitalistic venture, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not without cost. There's downsides to blockchain. It's slow. Sometimes you write to the database and you can't afford to write to it anymore. It's already full, right? So do you want a database that doesn't work sometimes? Yeah. I don't, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of situations where you don't need a blockchain. You can just use the database instead, right? Yeah. You want to, let's start with you on the end. Tell us why Monero? What's Monero? What's the main focus of Monero? What do they do?
Well, it's fungible.
Okay. All right. Why Digibyte?
You know, everybody typically is focused on store of value and currency, which that obviously got people's attention. But we fundamentally believe properly applied blockchain technology can fix 95% of today's cybersecurity vulnerabilities, because we're talking about the recreation of the internet. So that's kind of been our focus. So
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting where a lot of your technology is being used in other chains too. So I like the collaboration. And Zencash or Horizen, I'm sorry. I've known
worries.
Zencash for so
it means
long.
that
It's hard.
Zencash resonated
It's
with
hard
you, right?
to it's hard to go back.
No, so I mean, we're taking what we think is one of the most interesting cryptographic innovations in the industry and applying that across a whole application domain. So really, the problem that we're trying to solve is data privacy and trying to help individuals own their data versus kind of the flip side of that, which is the world that we live in right now, where companies build applications that we know and love, but we actually don't have access to that data. We're really data workers and not realizing that we're giving away the fruits of our labor. So our whole point for existing is really to leverage this blockchain technology, leverage the zero-knowledge cryptography, and of course we have a privacy cryptocurrency, but really take this technology and apply that into the data domain.
EOS.
Yeah, so I'm part of one block producer. There are 21 block producers. There are over 400 registered that are competing for those top 21 spots. So just to caveat, my definition is not the definition of this distributed community. But for me, it is about recentering the value creator at the epicenter of the conversation. So creating an agile, decentralized operating system that allows developers to build these incentive structures in the form of applications that the end user can use, and allowing whoever in this model is the value creator to be the winner there, and allow them to come out on top. That's what it is for me.
Awesome. And Bitcoin Hex.
So Bitcoin Hex, the vast majority of wealth that's made in crypto is by guys that sold their bags to you, the latecomers, okay? You guys bought into a project that was around for 10 years after it had gone up 1,000x, and a lot of you got wrecked, right? So instead of getting re-wrecked again, buying some other projects that have been around for a bunch of years, maybe you should get in at $0, okay? Maybe you can't lose money if you get something for free. And if no one uses any of this crap anyway, and it's just around to store value, the only one that represents a CD and paying people interest and more for storing value, so they never want to sell it, they can't sell it, price has got to go up, man. There's no supply.
Yeah,
So
I can't end up owing something afterwards?
Is that the same pitch then you would use 10 years from now?
No, that would be on your guys' side. I'd be like, let's be friends, guys. Let's all work together. We need to get money from the rest of the world. We're only 1%.
Holochain.
Well, if you want to build something that can scale and where it's not something that we're assembling the wings on the way down, then
Well, that's when you open the parachute, right? On the way down.
I mean, I'm not going to also make the big line speech where, okay, just choose us because we're so better. It's more, there's a model change, and I think there's experimentation that's warranted in a very different pattern from what blockchain has been proven. And I think if we can agree all on something, which is that we need experimentation for seeing what works. And so you can try with us.
Space coin.
Yeah, I guess that's one faucet. It's just, technology to inspire distributed systems. I believe the old models are becoming archaic, and we need new models. The world's showing an increasing need for it, so we're just here to produce the tools to do that.
Awesome. Should we open to, if anybody wants, does anyone want to ask any questions? Or you in the other room, No.
There's a block producer that you know, you have to market yourself in campaign, right? You have to be elected. But on their roadmap, they that was on it. So like what you were trying to do is they wanted to install a node in space. They wanted to launch a low orbit satellite. So it'd be interesting to connect you with them.
Yeah, like I said, we're all about collaboration, and distributed internet means it's distributed and not owned by one.
And they actually have rockets.
Since we're looking for animosity and no one in the crowd had the balls to ask hard questions, I'll just crap talk my fellow hosts up here. If someone's willing to like expend economic energy to shut down your communications because they don't like them, in the case of the Great Firewall of China, which I'm sure costs many billions of dollars a year to maintain, I think they could point a laser pointer that was slightly stronger than normal at your satellite and fuck it up.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, like, it's like you don't have a walled garden up there. It's literally just open space, right? You're pretty vulnerable up there too, just like you are down here. I don't think microsats are I think as soon as a microsat actually provided you any utility, they would screw it up just like they did BGP routing and some of the other crap that they do today.
Yeah, I mean, that's one cynical perspective, but the thing is, we have what we have, and we're just putting a foot forward in that direction. I'm not saying it's perfect. We never said that, but it's at least something different than what we've been doing, and that's going to lead to something else different, and that's how innovation's birthed.
Awesome.
We can take
It's
questions,
cool.
by the
Space
way.
is cool. I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of problems. I mean, you see Trump right now, he's going into the space wars and everything like that. I mean, but the thing is, right now, I see it as something that we can essentially put in people's hands.
Dude, can you imagine if you wouldn't need a military because no one else had a military? Save so much money, right? If everyone could just stop having militaries, that'd be fabulous.
Well, there ought to be a law. Go ahead.
All right.
This is an easy question for a MIDI poet. You're talking about fungibility, but could that backfire in the case of Monero? You know, you can't prove that you're clean, so you're turning yourself into a non-fungible.
No, so with Monero, it doesn't work like that. So with Monero, you have your account, and like you can always give, for argument's sake, so if an auditor needed to come in and you needed to prove how much is in your account, in theory, you can always give them the access to your account, right? If you're under a criminal investigation, it's exactly the same way as the police or the law enforcement. They'll have the authority to come into your house. So if they get the authority to come into your account, then I'm not telling you to break the law. Then you're going to have to hand over your private keys and show them. There's also a view key. So if you need to show them any one particular transaction as opposed to your whole account, you can also use that. It's not absolute privacy. We're just affording the user a level of privacy or a degree of privacy and making sure that they're in control about what they make public or not. Is that fair enough? Yeah?
You also can't prove a negative, right? Like, prove there's not a tea kettle floating in space in between here and the moon. You can't.
Go ahead.
Which top 20 coin do you think is the biggest shit coin and why?
IOTA. Well, so IOTA doesn't work, right? It's like a fake cryptocurrency. They have a big centralized party that takes everyone's coins and gives them back out when they want from a centralized thing. They don't have transaction finality. They don't have a wallet that works, or at least didn't the last time I crap talked them. Apparently, they maybe upgraded their wallet. They pump off of having industry partnerships when their partners don't use them for anything at all. It's like, am I an industry partner with Microsoft because I have Windows on my computer? Am I an industry partner with Samsung because I use their phone? Like, it's terribly stupid. And then what value are industry partners that aren't giving you money, right? Like, if your stuff's so good, why don't you charge for it? It's not good enough to charge for? Right?
I would say Initiative Q, but...
Initiative screw. We don't have time to scam you properly, so please leave us your name and email address, and we'll scam you at our convenience later.
When I was chatting to Richard, I think yesterday he showed me like the plans for his Bitcoin Hex, and I was like, oh, this sounds really like Initiative Q.
Yeah. That's the first thing I thought too, though.
They got there first.
Any other questions? Just shout out if I can't see you.
All right, so the central banks and large industry players are going to get into this game. How is that going to play out?
I think that companies that have large tech stacks like Facebook and Amazon that tend to build their own tools, build their own hardware, build their own standards even, are very much more likely to build their own coin infrastructure than pump your bags, whatever they might be. And they could also just fork something that works very well, for instance, Bitcoin, and throw all their economic mass into that, which would be pretty sucky for all of us.
So they're waiting for all of you to build it so they can steal it?
Welcome to open source.
I think there's two ways to interpret your question, which is one, they're going to get in like the specific things that we're talking about on stage, or are they going to start to embrace blockchain technology? And I really hope that it's the latter, because if banks, if governments were to start utilizing distributed ledger that is semi-permissionless, I mean, it really would be relinquishing a lot of control back to the people, a lot of transparency into what the government's actually doing, the ability to audit. If we're talking about a central bank putting their books on a blockchain, yes, please, I'd love to see that. I think the two very important use cases that I do hope that any government out there were to investigate first would be to, especially in countries that are ripe with corruption, would be putting land registry on, and then sponsoring armed guards to make sure that that votes are put on the blockchain as well. I mean, these two things comprise a ton of corruption around the world.
Finally, people will know that I vote for SpongeBob.
So I'm completely anti everything you just clapped for there, guys. So get ready. Here it comes. So let's say you've got an abusive husband, or it's 100 years ago, and you just buy votes. Well, how do you know that the votes that you're buying you got? Well, you've got your cryptographic receipt, because we're so smart. We put voting on the blockchain. So now when you buy your votes, you know you actually got them. Oh, shit, that doesn't work. As a matter of fact, that's what made Congress suck so badly. So you can Google brown box reform, which was done by a NASA engineer who was a crypto guy and has moved on to try and reform Congress, where when congressmen didn't have to have votes in public, they could take people's money and say they were going to do a thing and then actually do the right thing, and no one would know. Right? So they could keep getting money to get reelected, but then go actually vote well in Congress. But now, because there's public voting, the people who want to screw you over so they make more money, usually corporations, they pay those congressmen to vote against the public's interest, and they can verify they got what they paid for, and then sponsor the next guy that keeps doing the evil deeds for them. So putting votes on blockchains is terribly stupid, unless you do magic zero-knowledge proof stuff that you can prove that you did vote and it was recorded, but you can't tell anyone else how you voted. That's okay and better.
Actually, Rob, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, that's what we're doing. Thanks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a trade-off. So I typically don't take like an edge case perspective in almost any debate, because I was actually in Afghanistan helping with the 2014 elections, and paper ballots are no panacea either. I mean, it was horrible.
Yeah, the Libertarian Party actually did that. Paper ballots loaded onto the blockchain during the last election cycle. They did that at the convention, Libertarian Convention in San Antonio. They did that.
Okay, interesting.
What was the other thing you said that was good? It was voting and another thing.
Land registry.
Oh yeah, you can't do land registries on the blockchain. So this is a reason.
Yes, you can.
I'll explain. So blockchains are good because they remove trusted third parties. You can just trust the chain. You don't have to trust some human. But they break anytime you have to sample the real world. If you need analog to digital conversion, if a human or entity or machine or anything whatsoever has to translate the real world into digital for the blockchain to reason about it, that guy is the point of failure. So when the river enlarges and swallows a piece of land away, your blockchain doesn't know about it, but that land that used to be registered is being owned by some guy. It's not there anymore. So you have to trust someone to be able to notify the blockchain that the state of the real world has changed. And if you trust that guy to edit the blockchain, you can save a lot of time and a lot of energy by just letting that guy do the same thing in a SQL database or an Oracle. And then you don't have all the suck of the blockchain because you trust that dude anyway. So,
but you don't have to fake credentials either, because in being able to corrupt a land registry in certain countries could be giving a check to the guy running the database and he changes his cell and it's done. If you were able to use credentials and apply across an entire governmental infrastructure, what would be the word, department, then you'd be able to know exactly who was to do it. But certainly that there absolutely are trade-offs, and there absolutely are problems. And when you move from any digital point to the real point, you're going to meet friction, right? But it's certainly better than having them stacked up in papers sitting in a back office in Haiti and having an earthquake, and now no one knows who owns the land anymore. And now maybe it may not necessarily be blockchain or some version of distributed ledger, but decentralizing the points of failure is really what I'm talking about, and not allowing a single person be able to change a cell and take your house away.
I agree with him. In the third world, land registries suck balls. Totally true. So all you guys do, I'm going to save you a lot of money on blockchain technicians and consulting, okay? Take a picture with a camera of your land registry, hash it, and submit the hash to the New York Times classified section. And then it'll be all distributed, and you'll have an immutable history, okay? And then any time someone wants to prove they had a house, you look up the hash, you make sure that it calculated that JPEG properly, you look on the JPEG, and you go, there was my house, see? And you don't have to spend any money on any blockchain.
Now do it at scale.
Okay, we have a few more questions, but please try to keep it a little shorter from now.
Okay. What is your opinion on blockchain and internet? Like, you already talked about satellites, but what about pure software applications such as VPNs? And why do you call it Bcash and not Bitcoin Cash? Thanks.
So Bcash is a better name. People didn't say it out of hatred, they said it out of convenience. It's actually more brandable. At some point, if you want to, I would prefer Bitcoin Hex have more value than Bitcoin. After the 50-week launch phase, we're just on Ethereum. We have nothing to do with Bitcoin at all. So when that time happens, I'd be happy to be free of the name and have a better brand name so that when we overtake them in value, it doesn't look weird, right? So they would be smarter to use Bcash as a brand than Bitcoin Cash. The only reason they're doing that is because they want to steal the brand, dilute the brand, put them first when you're in the wallet so that you think it's the real Bitcoin. It's basically evil and illegal. If Bitcoin was an actual company that had trademarks and service marks, they would be able to sue for dilution of brand. It's a crime. So this is one place where open source sucks. Is it because of the tragedy of the commons? I guess no one's bag is big enough to sue for Bitcoin getting screwed over.
Well, and I'll just say Bitcoin is the chain with the most weight or proof of work from the Genesis block. And that's the rules of the game, and that's what it was created.
And in regards to your...
I think that's just maybe where some of the perspective comes in, because I don't really like to take any perspective on who's right or who's wrong, but when we make rules of a game, we follow them.
We need net neutrality. Someone could just tax you on every Bitcoin transaction you try to make. And they do that in the third world. So if you go to a crappier country that has bad internet, you get a good deal on going on Facebook because they worked out a deal, right? And then if you want to use anything else, you have to pay more, and it's unusable. So the fact that you only have a finite number of pipes that can come into your house and give you internet means that you have to regulate the sharing of that infrastructure. We can't afford to run a different cable to everyone's house for every ISP. They need to share, and they need to compete. And that's one of the few things government can do better than a private company, is the management of, there's a single shortest point between two places, and we put a road there, and we have to share that, everybody, right?
Well, that just opens up the ability for corruption, though. And that's the argument against net neutrality. Some person may have a different preference than another person if I'm paying for a specific bandwidth. Why is it going to be designated to me what I can look up? And I think that's one of the problems that we're seeing, that hopefully we can see shifts in that is there's more public demand, but fundamentally, it really comes down to all of us to choose what we're willing to accept or not. And that's what's really going to cause these things to start changing. If we just bow over and say, hey, central banks are going to make these currencies, and we start using them, then we're not doing any good. We have to have these tools as alternatives, but then we have to use them and use them to make that change. Otherwise, the world's not going to change.
I've seen a few more hands here, but let's try to keep it quick, and we'll try to get through all the hands.
Okay. Of course, these days, somebody's trying to start a new blockchain-based economy every week, and of course, a lot of them are gonna turn to shit on day 2. But then again, some of them might not, and you don't know which ones. But can you share some insights into what's definitely crap? If you look at there's a new blockchain-based economy starting up. If it's got this property, it's definitely crap.
Anything that's run by a single billionaire that does all the hashing. So that would be Bitcoin Cash, ABC, Bitcoin Cash SV, IOTA that just doesn't work. Straight up scams don't even have blockchains like Initiative Q that they just don't even, they didn't bother to even build a crypto. They're just like, yo, give us your details.
Anybody
We'll
wants
figure
to
it out
buy
later.
one coin?
Without naming, you might have just said it. Without naming anyone specific, it's just when you approach one of these projects, just ask the first question: does this need a blockchain? Does this need to be decentralized or distributed in some manner? Is that required for what they're trying to achieve to work? That would be the first thing that I would ask. And if the answer is no, move on.
And they've still my pump. Like, you'll be mad when the stupid projects that shouldn't work get really, really rich. So, like, unfortunately, like, you can give people good technical advice, and it can be bad investment advice.
I would also say, look at the teams behind the projects. If they have a legitimate, credible team that's actually doing real work, that's at least something to look into.
And actually contact those people to make sure they're
Yeah.
on there, because that's one of the
exactly.
bigger scams is they'll put somebody's face and name on these projects,
Exactly.
and they don't even know that they're on it.
Yeah, and yeah.
You might have projects with anonymous developers.
Yeah, true.
So I don't think there's any one rule to fit all. I think it's quite difficult, to be honest. I mean, if I was like an average, well, I'm an average person, but you know, if I was looking at all the projects and deciding where to put
He
my
thinks
money,
he's better than you.
yeah, no, I don't. It would be really difficult to determine, and I think it's probably up to the individual and just figure out like, what is your reason for buying one of their tokens? If your reason is to get rich, well then just look at the token that's going up the most. If your reason is because you want some decentralized internet solution, then maybe look at that token. If your reason is because you want a trustless monetary system, then look for a solution that does that. You know, so the question is really, you know, ask yourself what you're looking for, not ask us, because we don't know what you want.
So the inverse of your question would be, how do you know a cryptocurrency isn't a scam? And I can tell you that the longer a thing has been around, I can't remember the name of the law. I don't think it's Lane's law. I can't remember the name of the law. But the longer something's been around, the longer it's likely to be around. So from that perspective, if rational actors have filtered out the garbage by getting wrecked on it, longer existing cryptocurrencies should tend to be less crappy than newer ones.
Yeah, if you go back to 2013, 2014, 2015, and you took a sample every 6 months moving forward, there's only going to be a handful of projects that have continually been around for the last 4 or 5 years, and then obviously we go back to Bitcoin, and just like you said, everything started there.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if somebody noticed that the history kind of repeats itself. Jesus forged the Bible and that got crucified. So, but it's funny, right? Like every 2,000 years. So anyway.
Right. And now we have the Church of Latter-day Satoshis. So.
We got time for one more question. I saw some over here.
Apart from cryptocurrency, if you were going to pick one favorite application area of blockchain technology, what would be that application area in foreseeable time, future, and why?
Well, I just coming from personal experience, I spent 4 years in Hong Kong actually working on an international trade supply and logistics problem. And for me, the reason we attempted to go after that industry is because you're dealing with an industry where no governments trust each other. And anytime you're trying to apply a blockchain within a specific country, I think you're going to have a lot more problems. But when any sort of business or industry has to go from one part of the world to another part of the world, that's the perfect use case for a decentralized open source blockchain.
For me, I actually learned about a new implementation of blockchain technology or distributed ledger. Here at the conference, talking to a couple of people, and they're looking at a way of merging nanotechnology and blockchain tech and understanding how the data structure might help in the monitoring of biosignals. So the relationship between biology, obviously chemistry, and technology. I thought that was pretty interesting, and certainly a lot more futuristic than a lot of the projects you hear about.
So I already said voting in land registries, so something less, world-changing or something. And I know that you disagree with me about this because we were talking about it earlier. But I think that non-fungible tokens in gaming is a very cool thing to explore. A lot of gamers put in a lot of time, and they get pride from the in-game items that they're rewarded with. And by applying scarcity to these things, by bringing in more of the stakeholders within a certain video game story, the modding community, the actual user, the developer, I think that you create something new and possibly more involving personally is something that maybe could be used for evil too. You create a bad feedback loop, you have it on mobile games. But I think it'd be really cool to see non-fungible tokens in gaming and real digital ownership of the items that you worked so hard to receive.
I think you can make crypto and tokens work on anything that's affinity based. So if you have reward points or flight miles and you want them to be tradable outside your walled garden, then it could work for that.
Yeah, rewards.
It's currency-ish.
Yeah, rewards.com is doing that.
I would agree with Richard, right? Yeah.
I mean, I'll say what I said earlier, music. I think that's something that's fundamental for the culture of the world, something that everybody relates to, and I think it's something that really needs a lot of help.
I think things like hyperinflation with Venezuela, Argentina, Turkey, things like that, where cryptocurrencies can actually step in and act as a currency where the governments have failed, and it's working pretty good in Venezuela. It's a small, you pointed out, it's a very small number because they only have 3,000 or 4,000 merchants, but that's happened over the last 5 months, so that's pretty incredible. Actually.
I just thought of something else that would work really well. Like I don't know if you guys have ever tried to look up your family history, but once your grandparents and parents are dead or forgetful, you're screwed, right? And you're basically hoping professionals can figure it out. If we get more genealogy on the blockchain, I don't think any culture wants to forget its history. It seems pretty smart.
Yeah, they're doing that with genomes, marijuana genome.
Yeah, so this goes to my point is I'm a really big fan of data and you need privacy. So if you're gonna ever collect data in any situation, first of all, you wanna decentralize as much as possible so you don't have honeypots like corporations these days have just huge data troves that are definitely gonna be hacked at some point. So decentralize that, but then anytime you wanna collect data and in a way where it's privacy is preserved, but you can share it with other people, I think that the technology that we have is really good for that.
Especially healthcare, especially in the United States. That's something I'm very excited about.
Yeah, Factum is actually doing that with the Gates. They're teaming up with the Gates Foundation in Africa, I think Zimbabwe or something, so that they can keep track of people who have, I think it's antibiotic-resistant MRSA and AIDS and things like that. They're using the Gates Foundation is funding that. So.
Yeah, cool. I also think we're going to see a merger of IoT, connected devices, blockchain, and artificial intelligence. I like to tell people that, blockchain will be the rails that AI runs on because you have to be able to audit and verify the data feeds into these data sets.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, we see the cloud right now. We see the personal phone as the interface, is the different interface, logical and data layers. I think the blockchain or distributed ledger is going to become the new type of data layer. Or at least hybrids of public and private. The logical layer is going to become AI, and then the interface is going to be augmented reality, where you can actually see something through, let's say, AR glasses and click on it, and then you have AI doing the indexing that then retrieves the supply chain and creates a lot more transparency.
I think we've got to try to wrap it up there.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
so much. Let's give these guys a round of applause.
Thank you.
All right.